Can somebody please tell me why I made the executive decision to be Morticia Addams for Halloween this year? Hello, and welcome back. This week, I am going to be doing something a little bit nerve-wracking. I thought replicating a $1,600 dress would be anxiety-inducing, but it's not in the grand scheme of life. What is anxiety-inducing for me, however, is putting my curvy fat ass in a skin-tight dress.
Wow.
This week, we are going to do something that pushes my boundaries to the absolute max. So, as a family, Nick, Bay, and I decided we are going to be the Addamses for Halloween. So when Bay came to me and said she wanted me to make her Wednesday's Raven dress, I was utterly and completely thrilled with the notion because she's Wednesday. Like, in almost every way, shape, and form. I mean, she's never put piranhas in a pool, but she's Wednesday. Like, there's absolutely no denying that she's mine. And so when she approached me saying that she wanted the Raven dress, I was all for it. But then the reality set in that guess who has to be Morticia? Yeah. I grew up with Teen Beats and Teen Vogue and I grew up with celebrities dressing like this. So a woman like me, who I'm ample in every direction, isn't exactly your ideal image of slinky, sexy dress. And I have a really hard time getting past my own notions of what is sexy. I've always dressed very modestly, at least since having my daughter. And it's not because of like religious reasons. It's not because of cultural reasons. It's because I genuinely am uncomfortable in my own skin. Prior to having my daughter, I was a size 6 with barely an A-cup chest. Now, not so much. And it's one of those things where no matter how hard I diet and exercise, I'm just a bigger girl now. That is the reality I've come to accept. And as part of it, I found myself shying away from costumes that would have ordinarily been considered sexy. It's one of the reasons why I still haven't tackled Sarah. But this year, I'm going to go in because I need to. If I have to triple Spanx this shit and get out of my own head, I am going to wear this dress. Now, don't get me wrong. She is the queen of Halloween. She is the goddess of goth glam and one of my idols. However, she got a lot of va-va-voom and I don't. And so it's still ingrained in my head that if you don't look like that, you're not sexy. So dressing as Morticia Addams is something way outside of my comfort zone, as much as I love her and as fantastic as I think she is. But this is a sacrifice I am making because this is probably the last year that I'm probably going to be able to get away with doing a family theme for our costumes, as Bay is getting to the point where she doesn't want to hang out with mom anymore. The beautiful ladies that have portrayed Morticia in the past, most notably Catherine Zeta-Jones, Angelica Houston, Carolyn Jones, have all been stunning, lusciously curvaceous women in a beautiful and good way. Not What the f were you thinking? You should be wearing a potato sack. Like me. So, I started digging through fashion history again, because this is my go-to. I always find myself preferring vintage styles because it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. There's a lot going on in vintage styles. I also think that there have been so many additions to Morticia's wardrobe over the last century. Let's face it, we're about a decade shy of a century for the Addams family. And so that gave me a lot of different decades to choose from and play with that would make me feel at least the most comfortable. And I absolutely love the post-World War II era of the late 1940s, early 1950s. That tends to have a lot of rouging in the abdomen area, which is fantastic for hiding the tummy region, if you know what I mean. And so I found the perfect dress that marries late 1940s, 1950s vibes and gives me Morticia vibes. And it's a modern pattern. So I'm not going to have to really mess around with a vintage pattern to address it. So I found this Vogue pattern. It's Vogue 1520. It's got the rouged abdomen. It's a very deep V back, which I think works for Morticia. It gives the vibes of Morticia instead of it being a deep V front. Beautiful slit in the front also gives Morticia vibes. It's got a nice train to give Tish vibes. But at the same time, like, it has a nice vintage flair to it. And I can get away with making minimal adjustments to it. I might make the train a little longer, and then I may give it a little bit of a bell sleeve, very similar to the Catherine Zeta-Jones version of the dress that we see in the show Wednesday. And then to make it, I picked up this black stretch velvet, so then it'll be a little bit more forgiving on fit, and I'm not going to worry about doing a mock-up. But it's got a lot of weight to it. And so I feel like that will help hold me in places the way Spanx would. And then I know you guys are going to ask, to make Bay's Wednesday dress, I'm actually doing something pretty simple. I found this pattern. It is a modern pattern. Like, you can go out and buy it. I'll link it below if I can find it. New Look 6494. And I'm making this view A exactly as the pattern instructions for the bodice, adding ruffles to the yoke, and then changing out the skirt to a circle skirt so it's fuller, and adding ruffles. It's time consuming, but easy, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not having to create a pattern from scratch with this one. Like, easy squeezy lemon peasy. All right, let's get over the anxiety and self-deprecation and get working on this one. All right, here is Bay's dress so far. There are 3 layers of ruffles. They're just 3 inches by width of fabric that I hand gathered and then hand sewed into place on the yoke. You can actually see it right here. They're just gathered and hand stitched to the yoke right there. I did do built-in bubby cups for her own self-consciousness. But this is the bodice of that dress as is otherwise. These are the sleeves for view A, and then 3 layers of ruffles. For the skirt, I did a circle skirt. Then my first row of ruffles is 2 panels of 6 inches by width of fabric gathered down. The second row of ruffles is 4 with the fabric panels by 8 inches gathered down. And then all the way down here so far, this one is 10 inches by width of fabric. And then there's 8 panels gathered down. And this row I sewed directly to the skirt, so it'll act a little bit like a petticoat. And I cut it kind of on a serpentine so that the hem is uneven. And then attached to this ruffle, there's going to be another row, 8 panels, and then another row, 16 panels. So 2 more rows. That hot mess.
To create the next row of ruffles, instead of cutting them at 8 inches and cutting 2 sets, I cut them at 16 inches and ran my basting up the center. And then to create the final row of ruffles, I did the same thing, only I did my basting stitch on a serpentine, so that row of ruffles would have an uneven finished edge.
Okay, so the only actual pattern adjustment that I am making to this dress is this sleeve. I want Tish's traditional flowy sleeve, and while there are a complete variety of ways that Tish's infamous bat sleeves are accomplished, the premise is always there. She's always got some kind of voluptuousness happening at the base of her sleeve. This pattern does not have any of that, and so I need to give it to it. I think I kind of want to do a bell sleeve with a scalloped edge so that it looks like the base of a bat wing. All right, now that I have my sleeve transferred, I can make any changes to the pattern I want to on my tissue, and that way I'm not ruining the original. I want to keep the portion of the sleeve that touches my wrist at the same length. I don't want to add extra length to it. And so I'm going to keep this spot the seam and work off from there by adding my bat swoopy details. And then from up here, so this circle right here is where you would apply the lace trim if you were making this directly according to the patterns. Since I'm not, I'm going to still use this spot as my guide to where I'm going to start ballooning this out, if that makes sense. Okay, I changed my mind. I'm actually going to do it higher from the elbow, and that'll be a nice, more natural curve. So I have a lot of different sketch lines on here while I was trying to come up with the shape that I want. So I'm going to scale this down and show it to you in a little bit more of an easier form. So I started out with my basic sleeve shape, and then from the elbow dart, I swooped this line out. I kept this spot the same because I wanted it to still end at my wrist, and then curved some little, whoops, my pencil's dying, and then curved some little batwing swoops out to it. And made this line as smooth as possible. Then, to make sure that this side and this side were the same, oops, excuse me, little spider, I
folded it in half, lining up this seam. And then cut it out this way. And now I have a lobster. But when I sew this seam, that'll give me a nice batwing bell sleeve. So I actually did decide to extend the train by about 8 inches, 8.5 inches, and I graded it up to nothing at the side seam so that way I don't have to change the length of the front of the dress because I will end up tripping all over the place if that thing is longer. And then I also attached it using low tack tape in case I don't have enough fabric. I can remove it. I'll still have a train, but I can remove it without doing damage to my pattern, if that makes sense. All right, I've got this entire thing all pinned out and we have plenty of room. So the very first step is to actually put the gathering in the side pieces. And so now that I actually have that in and have it draped on my mannequin, it is significantly less scary. So because this is a 4-way knit and I am leaving out the lining, I don't feel like it's totally necessary to put the zipper in. I can still pull this over my head because it's so stretchy. And then I used a piece of grosgrain, and I used a piece of grosgrain ribbon to secure all of that ruching so it stays in place. Meanwhile, let's talk about that train. But it is now 2 o'clock. I have yet to eat lunch. And sustenance is required for forward momentum. Alright, now that sustenance has been consumed, I am going to tackle the bulk of this dress. And looking it over, it's shoulder seams, side seams. Because I am not lining it, I have to create a facing, sleeve seams, hem. Like, I mean, it's a long list, but it doesn't seem like a lot. Okay, this is tight. My anxiety in putting this over my mannequin was like bubbling. I mean, don't get me wrong, like it's an easy dress to make, but it's tight. That's tighter than anything I've ever worn. So I am going to create my facing and work on my sleeves and hem. That's all I have left. Facing, hem, and sleeves. And get my anxiety under control. That's the big one. To create my facings, I traced the neckline of the pattern pieces and then just only made it 2 inches wide. All right, so this dress itself really ended up being a 1-day build. It is completely done. Like, I don't have to do anything to it. I'm leaving the sleeves like this just because working with this stretch velvet, it's a lot like working with scuba knit, and so it didn't actually like shed or fray, and so I'm leaving it alone. I love the fact that I added the extra train. Oh, sorry. She's got the deep V in the back, which pays homage to the traditional deep V that she wears. I just don't want to have two dresses that I have to wear fancy bras for. So tomorrow we will style her wig. Huzzah for a one-day build. Just in time too, because it's time for me to go be a mom and pick Bay up from her cello lessons.
Getting moving today has not been easy because it is yet another gray and dreary couch potato type day here in Central Florida. And I'm not hating on it. And I want to snuggle with my fur babies instead of like, who's all for it? I vote for snuggling with the fur babies. But alas, I am on a timeline. I was also a little worried about the thinness of it, but once I tried it on, it looks very real. And so today, all I actually am going to do is straighten it, like straighten it, and maybe personalize my hairline a little bit. Otherwise I don't have to do much, and that makes me really, really happy. Okay, I need to go glue this down and put on some makeup, and I'll see you guys in the review. Okay, friends, welcome back. We got back last night. I'm still swaying a little bit. They're having a little Jack Sparrow vibe happening in my brain. And I did not do my final thoughts and outro in the room because the trick-or-treat Halloween, they called it Masquerade on the boat, was an incredibly busy night. We went from photo sessions to party to dinner to after party, and it was just boom, 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 boom. One thing immediately after the next. And so by the time I even had the kind of sort of opportunity to do final thoughts and outro, I had no voice left and I was just done. So here I am. So I'm utterly and completely in love with how Bay's Raven dress came out. Hands down, the best thing that I have made this year. My dress, I'm still working on my anxiety about my personal confidence. Part of having waited has given me the opportunity to look at the pictures, and so my final thoughts now are different than they would have been maybe if I had done them the other day. But I definitely feel like in the moment, like I was getting a lot of compliments between the photographers and other guests on the boat, and you know, I think 99% of that is because Bay totally sold it. But when I look at the pictures, all I see is how much I'm worried about how I look in the dress. What I see when I look at my pictures is that I feel uncomfortable in the dress. And I don't, you know, again, that's a social anxiety thing. That's a getting used to stepping outside of your comfort zone thing. All of which are scary for me. So, I mean, I think the dress came out great. I wouldn't have done it any other way, having done that dress. Is it the right dress for my body? I don't know. I had fun, and I think that that's what matters. Who's to say what is the right dress for your body? If you're happy and you're having fun in it, I don't feel confident in that statement whatsoever. But it is something that I am very hard at work on. So for now, the dress itself is rockin' and looks really cool, and I just have to work on my own anxiety a little bit harder. I definitely think I need to take a week off to kind of recoup. I need a vacation from my vacation. However, I am totally willing to edit a video if you guys want to see a vlog of the cruise. Between Nick's phone, my phone, the Rebel, and the Disney photographers, we have well over 1,500 files in a folder that I still have to go to. But if you guys think that that's a good idea, let me know down below. Okay, friends, thank you so much for hanging out with me this week, and I will see you next time for more shenanigans.
T-Rex arms!